What happens when you drop a bunch of identical rabbits into a world with limited food, and just let evolution decide who survives? There are no goals, no manual control. All the rabbits care about is eating and reproducing. They have a few genes, speed, perception, and so on, to aid them, which mutate slightly each generation. Let's put it into a simulation and see what happens. Evolution is the process of a species changing over time in response to pressure from their environment. For example, imagine two rabbits both going for the same plant. If one gets there first, it survives. The slower one starves. The faster rabbit reproduces, and its offspring inherits slightly mutated versions of its genes. Over time, the one best suited to survive, faster, smarter, more efficient, are the ones that pass on their genes, and the rest die. So even without predators, this simulation still applies pressure, because limited food means competition, and competition drives adaptation. Our world is a 25 by 25 grid, filled with plants, dandelions in this case, and rabbits. Each rabbit carries 5 genes that controls how it behaves. Perception determines how far it can see. Speed decides how fast it can move per turn. Stealth gives it a chance to avoid being noticed by others. Litter size determines how many babies it produces at once, and gestation time determines how long each pregnancy lasts. For now, rabbits reproduce asexually. That means they don't need mates, they simply have a chance to get pregnant each turn depending on how well fed they are. It's not realistic, but it keeps the simulation simple for now. We'll add proper mating in the future episode. We'll be running 3 scenarios today. In this one, we spawned 20 rabbits in a world with an average amount of food. At first, the rabbit population exploded, climbing past 250 in just a few hundred turns. With no predators and plenty of food, it was easy for them to eat, stay full, and reproduce rapidly. But eventually, the food started running out faster than it could regrow, and the population suffered a massive crash. Over time, the number stabilized at around 100-210, fluctuating slightly depending on how many plants are available. That number, 110, is what we call carrying capacity. It's the limit on how many rabbits this environment can sustain at once. Looking at how the rabbits adapted, we can see that speed evolved first. Early in the simulation, the world was overcrowded, so reaching food before other rabbits was critical. Speed nearly tripled within the first 1,000 turns. Eventually, it plateaued, meaning that extra speed no longer gave a big advantage. At that point, perception started rising steadily. After all, what good is speed if you don't know where to go? Being able to spot food from further away became more valuable as competition grew fiercer. Litter size showed a very different pattern. At the start, there was a big spike, likely fueling the population boom. But when food became scarce, large litters became a disadvantage. The bigger the family, the more mouths they have to feed. The value dropped just as quickly, settling at smaller, more manageable sizes. Gestation time behaved similarly. There were a few attempts to shorten it, but each time the value quickly returned to normal. Producing fewer offspring turned out to be better for keeping the population stable. Meanwhile, stealth didn't change at all. With no predators around, being harder to detect offers no benefits, so evolution simply ignored it. By the end of the simulation, the rabbits had settled on a very specific build that gave them best chance of survival in this environment. We can confirm this by looking at the hunger data. At the start, there was more food than rabbits, hunger levels stayed high because everyone was well fed. Then came the famine and hunger levels dropped sharply. Everyone was starving and the population was quickly dying off. After that, the population entered a stable period, averaging around 13 hunger. From there, as rabbits evolved better strategies for finding food while keeping the population constant, their average hunger steadily rose again, showing they were adapting to survive more efficiently. Now, let's flip the question. What happens when food isn't a problem? In this simulation, we tripled both plant growth and the maximum number of plants allowed on the map. Food is everywhere and rabbits love it. Just like before, we see a massive population boom followed by a crash. But this time, the peak reaches almost 450, almost double the previous simulation. As you'd expect with so much extra food, the carrying capacity also jumped significantly, supporting nearly 3 times as many rabbits as before, but evolution completely stalled. If we look at speed, we see a similar early rise, but it quickly plateaus and barely increases after that. The likely reason is overcrowding. When the world is jam-packed with rabbits, being fast doesn't matter much if there's nowhere to run. Perception fares even worse, staying completely unchanged from the start. After all, when food is everywhere, you don't need to see far. Even wandering blindly, you're bound to find something to eat. Litter size, however, it behaves a little differently. While still relatively low, it averages higher than it did in the previous simulation. With so much food available, the environment can support larger litters, at least up to the point where space starts becoming a limiting factor. Station time stays about the same as before, since higher litter counts are enough to boost population growth. There is no evolutionary pressure to shorten pregnancies and overcrowd the environment even further. If we compare these utopia rabbits to the rabbits from Simulation 1, they're far less adapted, because when life is easy, there's no reason to evolve. If you place these two populations in the same competitive environment, the food-scarce rabbits would certainly outcompete and wipe out the utopia rabbits. This mirrors what we see in human biology today. Thousands of years ago, something like a severe allergy could easily mean death. There were no alternative food sources, no supplements, and no medicine. But today, we can avoid allergens, replace missing nutrients, and treat dangerous conditions, allowing genes that would have been lethal to persist and spread. The same thing happened here. In a world overflowing with food, even inefficient rabbits survive just fine. And when survival is easy, evolution slows to a crawl. Now, let's see what happens when we change the rules of the environment. This time, we keep the same number of dandelions as in Simulation 1, but instead of spawning evenly across the map, they now grow in clusters, like real dandelions spreading pollen. Food is no longer everywhere, it's concentrated in specific spots. And right away, the population chart looks different. There's much more variance in rabbit numbers over time, even though the long-term average still hovers around the same number. Why? Because, while the carrying capacity is same, the way they reach this carrying capacity is different. Now, instead of randomly stumbling across the map being spread evenly, they have to find a cluster, which means that once they find it, they're going to settle there and they're going to feast for a while. But once that cluster is stripped bare, many are going to starve until they stumble across a new one and resettle. This is reflected in the population graph. When the number of rabbits spike, the number of plants plummet, and vice versa. With clusters sometimes dozens of tiles apart, speed suddenly becomes critical. Once a rabbit finds a cluster, it needs to eat as much as possible while food is available, but it also has to reach the next cluster before anyone else when this one runs dry. This constant race for resources drove rabbits to evolve faster and faster over time, and unlike before, there was no plateau. The pressure to keep getting quicker never really eased. What's surprising is that perception, the ability to spot food from distance, barely improved at all. It only rises slightly late in the simulation. Likely reason is that rabbits seem to have chosen a speedster strategy. Don't waste energy on long-term vision, just pick a direction and run as fast as possible until you hit a cluster before someone else does. Litter size and gestation time stayed mostly unchanged, except for one brief spike around 2000 that was quickly shut down. The logic here is simple. Once you find food, you don't want to force the area with more mouths to feed, because that just forces everyone to scatter and search again. The hunger chart makes this crystal clear. Unlike the previous populations, which evolved to eat daily, these rabbits behave almost like bears, feast when food is abundant, then endure long periods of scarcity. Find a cluster, eat as much as possible, then burn through it, and then starve until you locate the next one. And just to confirm these adaptations aren't random, stealth once again remains completely unchanged. Without predators, it offers no advantage here either. Across these three simulations, one thing became clear. Any competitive environment, no matter how simple, drives evolution. Food was abundant, the rabbits barely changed. There was no need to. But the moment resources became scarce, they began competing with each other, and every advantage mattered. Faster runner, sharper eyes, smarter strategies, only the fittest survived. And this is just the beginning. In future experiments, we'll add mating, multiple herbivore species, different plant sizes, terrain, more genes, and of course, predators. And we'll see how new pressure reshapes survival strategies. If you're curious how different animal sizes affect evolution, take a look at this video when it's released. If you got ideas for experiments or new genes to test, feel free to drop them in the comments. And thank you for watching.